John from Ripewave, and I am so excited to be sitting here in front of the original RMC-1 that I got a few years ago and the new RMC-1 Plus yet to be unboxed here. I'm going to show you the differences between these two. They're same in a lot of regards, particularly cosmetically, but it's when you get in under the hood with the hardware that's inside this case and the software, that's where the differences start to emerge. One of the reasons why I'm so excited is I brought in just about every brand that sells a product that's a receiver or a processor under $6,000. Now, it used to be a $5,000 limit, but now prices have gone up. Marantz, Denon, Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer, Anthem, Arcam. I keep coming back to the Emotiva RMC-1. It doesn't always have the features that the other products have, but it's the sound quality, it's the usability that I really liked, and it wasn't perfect. It had its software glitches, particularly with HDMI. Now this new Plus version, Emotiva, seeks to address those problems. Those in their beta program came back and said, you've done it, you've fixed these things. Now we're going to find out for ourselves. In this video, we're going to compare the differences, unboxing it. Does it come with the same stuff? Take a look at its manual, and then look at the front, look at the back, look at the remote. Where is it different? So come join with me on this exploration. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe to this channel and give me a thumbs up. So let's start this off. This is the RMC-1 original. I got it in 2022. I got it at the same time as I did a Marantz Cinema 50, which just came out. Now, the Marantz Cinema 50 had a few features that this didn't, but this did sound a lot better right out of the box, and then particularly more once we ran the direct calibration. Now, this came with everything that you see in front of you. I got one set of boxes that had the unit, had two boxes of accessories, which I do have out here. These are the original accessory boxes that came inside this. This is the original box for it, and it came with a power cable. This is a pretty hefty one. It's 3-prong. Marantz is 2-prong, so is Denon. Even with the AV20 that we now have in here, it came with this heavy remote. Now, it's not a backlit remote, and a lot of people complain that it isn't, but I find it's quite usable. It came with a birth certificate, as all Emotiva products seem to have a birth certificate. And it came with a letter signed by the leaders of the company and a printed manual. You don't see a lot of printed manuals nowadays. Everything is online. Now they do have it online as well. It came with this calibration microphone, the cable that goes with it, which is making a balanced XLR connection, but it does come to USB on the other end, and this little tripod, which is a lot better than those cardboard stands that come with Denon Marantz. I still like Denon Marantz for certain aspects because it's usually fully featured and you get things like Oral 3D. I don't think Emotiva has any plans of bringing Oral 3D. They didn't several years ago, and now with Oral 3D, it doesn't seem to be getting any more traction. In fact, I think they're losing traction. So I think that it's even less of a case that Emotiva would move forward with that technology. Let's talk about the Plus series from Emotiva. Now, this was introduced this year. They've been talking about it since I bought this one. And this RMC-1 Plus now is $5,499. They've gone up and down and all around with some of these pricing, but the RMC-1 now, brand new, if you're buying this brand new, is $5,499. They have an L version, just like they had in the past, that doesn't have expansion module capability, and that is the RMC-1L Plus, $4,899. And they have the XMC-2, which sells for $3,999. So the RMC-1 is the flagship. This is the top of the line of the series. And this is what I started with, and this is where I am going to continue. Now, Emotiva has done something special for me, normally with their trade-in program, where you take your old unit and you give it to them, and they come back with a new unit. And you give them your unit to start with. I asked for a special favor. I said, can I keep my unit so I can do a side-by-side comparison between the old and the new? And they said, yeah. And that was very nice of them. Now, I'm paying just about the same as what everybody else does, with their best discounts applied under normal circumstances. So I'm not really getting a price break, but they are giving me this special consideration. And I thank them for doing so, where I can have both of these in at once as part of their trade-in program. Now, they also have an upgrade program where they have you send in your product and they swap out boards, load it with new software, and send it back to you, the original chassis, and you keep your original remote and all that. And that's an upgrade program. And if you want to do that, you get a cost savings for the upgrade. So I pay a little bit more to do a trade-in program as I'm doing here. When I originally got the RMC-1 was October of 2022. So almost 3 years later, we're coming and doing this video when I did that comparison with the Cinema 50. And of course, that wasn't a fair comparison because you had a receiver at a lower entry-level product against a really audiophile grade AV processor separate. So that wasn't fair, but now we have our Marantz AV20, and we're going to have a head-to-head with the RMC-1, the RMC-1 Plus, and the Marantz AV20, which is the most expensive of the three, and see what comes out on top. And I'm really excited to see, with all the improvements, the inside. I talked about the inside of the RMC-1 Plus. What are we talking about that has changed with this new model? Now, they've ripped out most of the guts of this product, and what you get is a new ECC2 processor board. They moved away from the Texas Instruments Cetera ARM. It didn't have enough processing power. They replaced it with a Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4. It's been built in and qualified with gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi capability, Bluetooth. The old one never had wireless at all. So now we have all this wireless capability. If that helps you, that could be really good. One thing in particular that we like is that now the rack is built into it, no external boxes. So I talked about these first two accessory boxes where the cables and everything came with it, along with the original remote and batteries. They even included some fuses in case you ever needed them. I haven't needed them. The rack came in a little late, but by the time I got mine, it was available, but it came in a separate box. You got a getting started letter. You got a converter box because they did not design the rack, wasn't quite compatible with the circuitry in the original RMC-1. So you needed this extra box. They also gave you, as part of this, let's set this down here, a couple of Ethernet cables. If you did not have a network switch handy, they gave you this fast Ethernet switch with a few ports. So if you only had one run back to your closet with all your Ethernet, you were good to go. They gave you the power adapters that go for each of the boxes, and it worked. And you connected to the rack using your laptop, whether a Mac OS or a Windows machine, and you ran it from there. Now it would lock up occasionally for me, and I had to reset these boxes. So it's really nice that they built in the DRAC application into the hardware, just like any other product that you see. But I think they had the disadvantage of being a little early to the market. And that hurt them with the video side, and it hurt them with DRAC. Those who came a little later with 16 plus channel processors, receivers, had the advantage of time, and they were able to get it right. And they were stuck with their hardware design. And here's a chance for them to get it right with this ECC2 processor board. There's also a new video board, the 8K video processor board. But it's more than 8K. It's a HDMI 2.1 fully compatible versus this old unit was 2.0B. So it's using a brand new chip from Nuvoton, also known as Panasonic, but it's been sold off to Nuvoton. The KM864807B chip. And I believe there's 2 of them on the board to give you the video capabilities for the 8 inputs and 2 outputs of HDMI. So it's 4x2 matrix support. It has quick media switching, all the latest features for HDMI 2.1. And so this is really good. They hired an expert in HDMI to go and make this right. And I think that was an excellent move. There's no fans on these boards, which a lot of other products like Denon Marantz have fans. And they're monitoring actively for quick media switching. So they keep all those ports active to get this to work. There's also a new ADAC 16 audio board. So they moved to a different chip platform where you've got now Texas Instrument PCM 1795 chips versus what they had before with AKM. Slightly better specs with this. Now, Emotiva will tell you that it's marginally better, but I'm curious. Can I notice the difference, especially if I put these side by side? It's got good op amps. It's got electronic volume control. This is a very good board that you get with any of the new models and your trade-in program. You don't get this board if you're doing the upgrade path where you're sending your unit back. This also has a new FPR SP3 switching power supply, which is for the front display. And this is needed for when you have the expansion module. So I got this, I think, with this new Plus model. Those are all new circuits in there. They redid the whole code in this unit to replicate the functionality of the old, plus added in the new features. Let's set this stuff aside. Let's get in. We'll take a look at what the RMC-1 Plus looks like next to the first generation. And here we go. Now the box looks about the same size. The writing is about the same on the front of this, except for the fact that it has the plus, and it mentions a few new features, such it mentions 8K on the front of this. It talks about live AV. I'm not quite sure what that is because they don't talk about it in the manual. So the packaging has been updated to have some of these new features and the new model number indicated. Like other Emotiva products, these are designed in the United States, and they are assembled in the United States using internationally sourced parts. So expect to have some of these components coming from overseas, even to places like China. Now this is double box. Now when I got the first one, it came in a nice bag. So did all my Emotiva amplifiers, so I suspect this might be the same. So let's see if the contents are similar to what we've experienced in the past. Now lying on top is some literature. Let's see what this literature has in it. Now the original manual was a spiral bound manual printed off. We do get an Emotiva sticker, audio done right. That's a slogan they've been using. We do get a friendly letter signed by Dan Loffman and Lonnie Vaughn. Ray Dennison lead their engineering. We do have a birth certificate, so they continue to provide this. The serial number is right there on the birth certificate. The manual is different because the old one did have the L. It was a manual for both the 1 Plus and the L, and it was spiral bound. This one is stapled instead of being spiral bound, but it's nice to have a printed manual. We'll go into side-by-side comparisons on the manual later. Now, reaching from the top of this box, and I'll tilt it a little bit so you can see, this is what you get on the top. And we do have the USB cable for the calibration. We have, just like before, a little pouch with the Emotiva microphone. This looks to be exactly the same. This is an EMM1 microphone, and the one I had before was an EMM1 microphone, so that hasn't changed. We have the same microphone. And another pouch in here. We have the PR1 remote, has not changed, same model number as before. And these are heavy, not backlit. They haven't changed that, but this is a magnetic back. And if you use something like a small screwdriver, you can take the metal back off of it and put in the special batteries. These are smaller batteries, so probably somewhere in here are the batteries that go in it. We'll lift up the first layer of foam, and we do find, flanked on either side of the processor, 2 accessory boxes, just like we had before. We'll open up box 1. Box 1 has a bag in here, and you open up the bag. It's a power cord. Feels very similar to the one we had before. It has one of the trigger cables that you can use. We actually use all 4 triggers with ours, with our external amplifiers and our subwoofers. And it does have indeed the 2 smaller batteries that you're going to need to power your remote. I haven't had, over a course of 3 years, had to replace these batteries, but they are these smaller batteries. What is new is an antenna for your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth. And once again, they are supplying a fuse. Should you have the rare odd chance that you blow the fuse, and we haven't done that yet. Accessories box number 2, they provide the same tripod that we got with the last set. In this last bag, we get an antenna and a USB memory device that we can use to put new firmware in here. I think the last firmware, as of this video, was done in June. And we'll make sure, we've already downloaded it earlier today, and we'll make sure this does indeed have the latest firmware. And if it doesn't, we'll do the upgrade. Now let's get this out of the box. It is in the nice Emotiva bag. And then here is the AM antenna. So this does have a AM FM tuner, just like the prior model. So here is a nice dedicated Emotiva bag. And what we'll do is unwrap this. These have big rubber feet on the bottom. Now I think this original one was 24 pounds without the packaging. I'm not 100% sure, but this is the same weight. Maybe it's a little lighter. We'll have to weigh it. I don't think Emotiva published the weight yet, but we'll find out. Now the front of these should look exactly the same. Notice that the silk screen on the front does not have the Plus on it, even though this is a Plus model. It does have on the top here a list of features, and it does say live AV on both of these, even though the box for the old one didn't say live AV. But this one says 8K, which this one says 4K. So there's some differences there. The OLED display should be the same amount of pixels and everything. So let's flip this around the back and we're going to notice some differences. One thing that the new model won't have is these special hardware accessories for Dirac, because it's all built in to the new processor. So we don't need an external converter. We don't need the extra switch that is part of this. There is one subtle difference I'll notice here, is the perforations for the ventilation. These were like pinholes on the old one, and then on the new one, they're slots. So I don't know if there was a thermal reason that they moved, or just that their case design just changed. But looks like, you know, slots could give you a little more airflow than previously. Now let's take a look on the back. Both of these have the unique tall RCA connections that I only see on Emotiva products. I do not see this on other brands. We still have 8 connections for HDMI and 2 outputs. That is the same. All the I/O here is the same amount of counts, with one exception. They've pre-populated in here the expansion module for having an extra balanced inputs, which is nice, and I could use those. You still have the original XLR input, so that's what I use for my phono preamp. My record player is at the back of the room, comes back balanced into here, and it works marvelously. We do have this populated here, this phono input, which I will try, even though I normally run it through a Parasound preamplifier. I'm going to try it direct to see if this one compares to the Parasound preamp. That would be interesting. This supports moving magnet and moving coil connections, with some dip switches to configure it just for the cartridge that you are using. The silk screen has changed, so this does say RMC-1 Plus on the back. The old one just said 1. A little subtle difference on the power connection here. The rocker switch to turn it on and off. This one's towards the top, this one's towards the bottom. Should make a difference. The other thing that you'll notice different is this connection here, and that's for your Wi-Fi antenna, when you can put that on now. So you do still have a spare expansion slot here. It would be extremely nice if Emotiva comes out with additional outputs, because now I think, you know, with the years gone by, this was originally 16 channels was a big deal. But now I've got a room with a 9.2.4 configuration. If I want to add a couple more subwoofers, I'm at a limit. If I wanted to have another row of heights, I'm past the limit. And we're starting to see the likes from Anthem and Marantz and their higher end models supporting 17 and even 19 channels. And of course, if you pay more than that, moving to something like a Storm or Trinoff or an Acurus, you might get more channels as well. Now, with the physical differences out of the way, I did do a comparison between the old manual and the new manual. And beside the spiral bound difference to the staple bound on the new one that we mentioned earlier, and that the new one seems to be more dedicated just to the RMC-1 Plus and not the L or the XMC2, there are some subtle differences. Now, they're both about just over 100 pages, so there's just a 2-page difference in the new one having a couple more pages. in 2025 versus the 2018 version of the manual. And when they unpack it and it confirms what we just saw, is the contents are the same as shown here. It's interesting to see that they didn't update the picture to also include the Wi-Fi Bluetooth antenna that I just put on. Now, looking at the introduction, you see a few more changes. They rewrote a good portion of this introduction. I'm going to highlight a few of the things that they added. That first paragraph is now talking about DTS-X Pro, which you didn't have in the old unit, and the support for HDMI 2.1 and 8K video. Moving on to the next paragraph, it talks about the new and more powerful main processor that's faster and more capable for video switching. That has been a problem. I'll tell you, even the new Marantz AV20 that I have in here could be faster on video switching. It'll be interesting to see how quickly this switches video compared to that new Marantz AV20 that sells for $6,000. Full support for 8K resolution. Now, the old one had ARC and eARC capability, so no changes there. But they also talk about, to that second paragraph at the end, a new web-based controlled interface. This never had web capabilities. Now, that was one area that Emotiva was very behind a lot of the competition. One of the last brands not to have a web interface. Now it has it. Modern immersive formats, and here again, they're mentioning DTS-X Pro in this third paragraph. And they complete that third paragraph by talking about all the inputs and the outputs with HDMI 2.1, 8K, and the fast port switching. So repeating a lot of things from earlier on, but they're all new topics. Looking at the specifications, on the DSD playback, they used to make some claims about supporting DOP, DSD over PCM standard. That was coming. It was being developed. I don't think it was ever added. I haven't seen anything or any version that I've come across with that added that feature. And at the time of writing that original manual, and it's still up there as of today, that it will be available shortly. Now, they don't talk about that at all now. Next group here, we're talking about popular remote control options. Now they talk about flexible remote control options. So before they were talking about Apple and Android and Windows components talking to this through intelligent IR commands and network-based control. Now they're talking about using the web-based remote control interface to enable access from a smartphone or computer using a standard browser. So a change there. One specification that they don't seem to mention now is support for DTS ES Discrete 6.1. Did that feature go away, or are they just not talking about it? It's hard to say, but here you can see that they've added DTS-X Pro, and they've also added, they've updated the support for Dolby Atmos. And with this, the height virtualizer. And they updated DTS-X support, so Virtual X is now listed here as supported. This was another thing where some of the competition had a chance to update the Dolby Atmos and DTS-X codecs that are in here, and now finally Emotiva has done the same. Inputs and the outputs, we've mentioned these already, the HDMI with the fast port switching FPS. Fast port switching is a new feature. I think this is one of the first products to have that, but also variable refresh rate and fixed rate link is all there. The combined Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna, the wired IR remote control input is listed here, although I think that was supported before, and that the digital outputs are also 2.1. So those are some additions. When they talk about upmixing with the old model, they said upmixing may not be supported. And they say this time and time again throughout the manual, but now it seems like they have greater support for upmixing. That language is now all gone from the manual. And they talk about the content being decodable by DTS:X Pro using the DTS:X decoder. There also was a change on how you could do manual room correction. And there was really two separate paths with the old model, where one would go off on manual equalization and the other one go for Dirac. And now it seems to be more integrated, the manual correction and Dirac and its three filters. Now, they always had three filter sets before, but now they're working together. We'll talk about that more in a bit here. When you look at the informational menu in here, now one menu choice is gone, the kernel version, but I think that's substituted with others, such as the CPU version, which is now here. But now there's a host name, which is needed for when you do that remote interface, that web interface, a serial number field, which wasn't there before. Also getting more HDMI information, the status, the ARC status, the CEC status. This is going to be helpful for probably troubleshooting. There's also a server setup field that gives you the current version of the remote control interface. So there's a separate version just for that interface. And then the Dirac server, the current version of Dirac Live firmware module on the RMC-1 Plus. Are all extra things that are included in the informational menu that we didn't have before. On the main zone menu for these, you now have options for DTS dynamic range control and HDMI output selection that you didn't have before. So if you have some incompatibilities with your HDMI, you could limit what HDMI outputs are going out just so there isn't a conflict, but that's not a common situation. On the RMC-1 menu system also, when they talked about Dolby loudness management, they gave an awful lot of extra information before. Now it's simplified in the manual. I don't think they've taken anything away, but they've also added in the virtualizer function for Dolby loudness management, which wasn't there before. And they go into more detail here on this page about speaker presets and how you can, use these with the manual EQ plus the three Dirac Live filter sets in combination and for one of the two presets. So layering your manual equalization with the Dirac if you choose to do something like that. The Atmos description and the DTS:X compatibility, there was a whole matrix that was included before. They've simplified, they've got rid of that, and outlining when various upmixers are used or not used. There was one particular language that they don't talk about now, which is with the old unit, the Dolby Surround upmixer could not be used with Dolby Atmos content or with content encoded with any other DTS digital audio format. So there's more flexibility with the upmixing as before, but generally speaking, Emotiva likes to keep it. If you're getting a Dolby signal, they want to use the Dolby decoding. If they're getting a DTS signal, they want to use the DTS decoding. Unlike some other products where you can cross-pollinate and take a Dolby signal and run it through the DTS-X decoder or the Oral 3D decoder. And so they remove some of this language here under Dolby Atmos on DTS:X as well. And they're talking about Pro now when they didn't talk about Pro. They didn't have that capability before. On the preferences manual, now there is a DTS dialog control and a DTS direct. And so this allows you to control the dialogue from 0 to 6 dBs. You didn't have that setting before. DTS direct helps you prioritize the layout of the channels in the content itself over the configuration in the system. That might be helpful when you want to fix it into a particular mode. On the new RMC-1 Plus, you also have the Wi-Fi and the host name settings in your network menu. So we talked about those as features that were coming, and this is where you can go in and make those settings. On the speaker menu, this is where you can see the difference. Instead of your presets for Dirac Live going right out to Dirac, now they can be enabled, but also be accessed after the equalization, that manual equalization. So that is different than before. On the levels screen, there's a bunch of language in there about configuring center heights, which would be hidden if you already enabled front height and rear height speakers. That's gone right now. I don't know how much of a change that results in. Also, a notes about Dirac Live options and speaker presets that are initially disabled in the menu. That content is gone for whatever reason. There is a note on size, and it says you should not configure a speaker that you don't have. Because if you configure a speaker that's not really there, it's going to screw things up, particularly with Dirac. So I think this was a good addition, that extra note there. It might have been the same problem as before, but now they're calling it out. They also had some extra notes here on audio inputs. So some changes in here because the audio inputs are changing in HDMI types. Some subtle changes here to support the 8K. That is mentioned in the manual. And then that speaker presets, they're calling out that independently configuring those for both the manual EQ and Dirac filter sets, whereas before you didn't have that same level of flexibility. Of course, when they're describing the HDMI, they couldn't talk about 8K before. Now they can talk about it. Also on digital inputs and outputs, there is this note now that about the XMC2 Plus, this is the only part in the manual they talk about the XMC2 Plus, that those are not going out with any room correction, tone control, or EQ. It's kind of an odd thing to have in here. It might be a little misplaced in an RMC-1 manual. The USB stream input, again, they're not talking about DSD over PCM anymore, and that the rates, they seem to only want to talk to PCM audio up to 24,192. Before there was some notes about 24,384. So now they're not going any further than 192 kilohertz. On the rear panel for Ethernet and USB ports, they now talk about Wi-Fi connections. On the rear panel with the infrared, now they're also talking about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on setting those up. And they talk about the web-based remote control interface, a whole new section that wasn't present before. Again, the same comments about USB streaming and the support for 24,192 versus 384, and the DOP that they don't talk about anymore. And then care and maintenance, they do list what fuse to use if you have to get one beyond what's provided here. The whole talk about changing internal power supply fuses has been removed, sort of like they probably don't want you to change an internal fuse, just that one that's accessible from the back on the power. And then restoring a connection, they do make a note here about Dirac Live, which is not stored as part of the configuration on the old model, but they've taken that away, probably because it's built in now. And then performing a factory reset, they talk about Dirac speaker presets, and they don't talk about that now, again, because it's built in. And then troubleshooting, they talk about in the old manual taking a long time to start after you switch inputs on the RMC-1, and that's gone probably because they fixed a lot of the performance problems. And of course, the last page here where they give all the little logos and everything, there's new logos. We won't read through now, but we've moved from the AKM Velvet sound to Burr Brown Texas Instrument chips. So they talk about that now where they didn't before. And of course, it's HDMI 2.1 with DTS:X Pro, all that in there. So that's great. This is probably a good place to wrap up with this first look at the RMC-1 Plus versus the original RMC-1 side by side. The next thing is to hook these things up and compare them. We know what we're going to run into on the configuration. We're going to try out the new web interfaces, and we're going to do that sound comparison, not just these two models together, but against the Marantz AV20. Now, we still have our Cinema 50 here, which we know it will blow out of the water anyways, but we have it if we want to do that as kind of just an extra reference point. But that comparison with the AV20. Now, the AV20 is sounding pretty good to me, and I'm going to hold judgment for this video, and we're going to talk about that later, how it compares against these Emotiva models. If you're looking for a deeper comparison between the old with the new and the other models, the RMC-1L and the XMC2, then you should take a look at the video that we put together in June that compared all these models feature by feature of each category. So until the next time, get some comments in. Let me know what you think. This is exciting times to compare these units. This is going to be a long-term addition to our unit. The original RMC-1 will go back to Emotiva, so I get credit for that return, but we'll also have that AV20 as a long-term purchase. And we'll keep comparing the two models over time. So what do you think? Let me know. Until the next time, keep evolving your audio experience.